Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Chapter 14. Maitreya Uvacha Bhrugvadayaste Munayo Lokanam Kshemadharshinaha Goptaryasati Vainrunam Pashyantah Pashusamyatam. The great sage Maitreya continued, O great hero Vidura, the great sages, headed by Bhrigu, were always thinking of the welfare of the people in general. When they saw that in the absence of King Anga, there was no one to protect the interests of the people, they understood that without a ruler, people would become independent and non-regulated. Veeramataramahuya Sunitam Brahmavadinaha Prakrutya Sammatam Venam Abhyashinchan Patim Bhuvaha. The great sages then called for the queen mother Sunita, and with her permission they installed Vena on the throne as the master of the world. All the ministers, however, disagreed with this. Shrutva Nrupasanagatam Vena Satyugrashasanam Nilil Yurdasya Sadhyaha Sarpatrasta Ivakavaha. It was already known that Vena was very severe and cruel. Therefore, as soon as all the thieves and rogues in the state heard of his ascendance to the royal throne, they became very much afraid of him. Indeed, they hid themselves here and there as rats hide themselves from snakes. Sa'arudan rupastana unnadhoshta vibhutibhihi avamene mahabhagan stabda sambhavitasvataha. When the king ascended to the throne, he became all-powerful with 8 hands of opulences. Consequently, he became too proud. By virtue of his false prestige, he considered himself to be greater than anyone. Thus, he began to insult great personalities. Yevam madhanda utsikto niraham nirankusha iva dvipaha Paryatan Ratamastaya Kampayannivarodhasi. When he became overly blind due to his opulence, King Vena mounted a chariot and, like an uncontrolled elephant, began to travel through the kingdom, causing the sky and the earth to tremble wherever he went. Nayashtavyam nadatavyam nahotavyam dvijah kvachit itinyavaryadharmam bheri ghoshena sarvashah. All the twice born Brahmanas were forbidden henceforward to perform any sacrifice, and they were also forbidden to give charity or offer clarified butter. Thus, King Vena sounded kettle drums throughout the countryside. In other words, he stopped all kinds of religious rituals. Venasya munayo durvruttasya vicheshtitam vimrushya lokavyasanam krupayochusma satrinaha. Therefore, all the great sages assembled together and, after observing cruel Vena's atrocities, concluded that a great danger and catastrophe was approaching the people of the world. Thus, out of compassion, they began to talk amongst themselves, for they themselves were performers of the sacrifice. Aho ubhayatah praptam lokasya vyasanam mahat darunyabhayato deepte ivataskara palayoho. When the great sages consulted one another, they saw that the people were in dangerous position from both directions. When a fire blazes on both ends of a log, the ants in the middle are in very dangerous situation. Similarly, at that time, the people in general were in dangerous position due to an irresponsible king on one side and thieves and rogues on the other. अराजकभयादेश कृतो राजा तदर्हणः ततोऽप्यासीद्भयं त्वद्य कथं स्यास्त्वस्ति देहिनाम्. Thinking to save the state of irregularity, the sages began to consider that it was due to a political crisis that they made Vena king, although he was not qualified. But alas, now the people were being disturbed by the king himself. Under such circumstances, how could the people be happy? Aheriva payah poshaha poshakasyapyanarthabhrit Vena prakrutyaiva kalaha sunita garbha sambhavaha. The sages began to think within themselves, because he was born from the womb of Sunita, King Vena is by nature very mischievous. Supporting this mischievous king is exactly like maintaining a snake with milk. Now he has become a source of all difficulties. Nirupitah prajapalaha sajigam sati vaih prajaha tatapi santvaye mamum nasmam statpatakam sprushet. We appointed this Vena king of the state in order to give protection to the citizens. But now he has become the enemy of the citizens. Despite all these discrepancies, we should at once try to pacify him. By doing so, we may not be touched by the sinful results caused by him. Tadvidbhira sadvrutto venosmabhih kruto nrupaha santvito yadino vacham nagrishyat yadharmakrit santvito yadino vacham nagrahishyatya lokadhikkara sandagdham dahishyamasvatejasa. The saintly sages continued thinking, of course, we are completely aware of his mischievous nature, yet nevertheless we enthrone Vena. If we cannot persuade King Vena to accept our advice, he will be condemned by the public and we will join them. Thus by our prowess we shall burn him to ashes. Yeva madhyavasayainam munayo gudamanyavaha upavraja bruvan venam santva itvacha samabhihi. The great sages, having thus decided, approached King Vena. Concealing their real anger, they pacified him with sweet words and then spoke as follows. Munaya uchuhu Drupavarya nibodhaitadhyate vignapayama bhoho ayuhu shri bala kirtinam tavatata vivardhanam. The great sages said, Dear king, We have come to give you good advice. Kindly hear us with great attention. By doing so, your duration of life and your opulence, strength, and reputation will increase. Dharma acharati pumsam brahmanah kaya buddhibihi lokan vishokan vitarat yatanantyamasanginam. Those who live according to religious principles and who follow them by words, mind, body, and intelligence are elevated to the heavenly kingdom, which is devoid of all miseries. But being thus rid of material influence, they achieve unlimited happiness in life. Sate ma vinashed prajanam kshema lakshanah yasmin vinashte nrupatir raishwar rupatir aishwaryadavarohati. The sages continued, O great sage, for this reason, you should not be the cause of spoiling the spiritual life of the general populace. If their spiritual life is spoiled because of your activities, you will certainly fall from the opulent and royal position. Rajanna sadvamatyebhyश्चोरादिभ्यः prajanrupaः rakshan yata balim grihnan iha pretya cha modhate. The saintly persons continued, when the king protects the citizens from disturbances of mischievous ministers as well as from thieves and rogues, he can by virtue of such pious activities accept taxes given by his subjects. Thus a pious king can certainly enjoy himself in this world as well as in the life after death. Yasya rashtre pure chaiva bhagavan yajna purushah ijyate svena dharmena janair varnashramanvitaihi. The king is supposed to be pious, in whose state and citizens the general populace strictly observe the system of 8 social orders of Varna and Ashrama, and where all citizens engage in worshipping the Supreme Personality of Godhead by their particular occupations. Tasya rajño mahabhaga bhagavan bhuta bhavanaha paritushyati vishwatma tishtato nija shasane. O noble one, if the king sees that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the original cause of the cosmic manifestation, and the super soul within everyone is worshipped, the Lord will be satisfied. Tasmim stushte kimaprapyam jagatamishwareshware loka sapalahye tasmai haranti balimadrutaha. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is worshipped by the great demigods, controllers of universal affairs. When he is satisfied, nothing is impossible to achieve. For this reason, all the demigods, presiding deities of different planets, as well as the inhabitants of their planets, take great pleasure in offering all kinds of paraphernalia for his worship. Tam sarvalokamarayajñasamgraham trayimayam dravyamayam tapomayam yajñairvichitrairyajato bhavayate rajan swadeshananoroddumarhasi. Dear King, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, along with the predominating deities, is the enjoyer of the results of all sacrifices in all planets. The Supreme Lord is the sum total of the 3 Vedas, the owner of everything and the ultimate goal of all austerity. Therefore, your countrymen should engage in performing various sacrifices for your elevation. Indeed, you should always direct them towards the offerings of sacrifices. Yajnena yushmad dvijatibir vina vitayamanena surakalahare स्विष्टा सुतुष्टा प्रदिशन्ति वाञ्छितं तद्देलनं narhasi veeracheshtitum. When all the Brahmanas engage in performing sacrifices in your kingdom, all the demigods who are planary expansions of the Lord will be very much satisfied by their activities and will give you your desired result. Therefore, O hero, do not stop the sacrificial performances. If you stop them, you will disrespect the demigods. Vena uvacha बालिशाभतयूयं वा अधर्मे धर्ममानिनः ये वृत्तिदं पतिं हित्वा जारं पतिमुपासते. King Vena replied, "You are not at all experienced. It is very much regrettable that you are maintaining something which is not religious and are accepting it as religious. Indeed, I think you are giving up your real husband who maintains you and are searching after some parama to worship." Avajananyami मूढ़ा नृपरूपिणमीश्वरं नानुविन्दन्ति ते भद्रं ihaloke paratracha. Those who, out of gross ignorance, do not worship the king, who is actually the supreme personality of Godhead, experience happiness neither in this world nor the world after death. Ko yajna purusho nama yatra vo bhaktiridhrishi bhartrusneha viduranam yata jare Uyoshitam. You are so much devoted to the demigods, but who are they? Indeed, your affection for these demigods is exactly like the affection of an unchaste woman who neglects her married life and gives all attention to her paramour. Vishnur Virincho Girisha Indro Vayuryamo Ravihi Parjanyo Dhanadah Somaha Kshitiragnirapam Patihi Yete Chanye Cha Vibudhaha Prabhavo Varashapayoho Dehe Bhavati Nrupate Sarvadeva Mayo Nrupaha. Lord Vishnu, Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, Lord Indira, Vayu, the master of air, Yama, the superintendent of death, the sun god, the director of rainfall, Kubera, the treasurer, the moon god, the predominating deity of the earth, Agni, the fire god, Varuna, the lord of waters, and all others who are great and competent to bestow benedictions or to cause all or to curse, all abide in the body of the king. For this reason, the king is known as the reservoir of all demigods, who are simply parts and parcels of the king's body. Tasman mam karma vipra yajadvam gatamatsaraha balim cha mahyam harata mattonyah kogra bhukpuman. King Vena continued, "For this reason, O Brahmanas, you should abandon your envy of me, and by your own ritualistic activities, you should worship me and offer me all the paraphernalia. If you are intelligent, you should know that there is no personality superior to me who can accept the first oblations of all sacrifices." Maitreya uvacha ittam viparyayamatihi papiyanutpatam gataha anuniyamanas तद्याज्ञां तद्याज्ञां न चत्रे भ्रष्टमङ्गलः तद्यज्ञं न चक्रे भ्रष्टमङ्गलः. The great sage Maitreya continued, "Thus the king, who became unintelligent due to his sinful life and deviation from the right path, became actually bereft of all good fortune. He could not accept the requests of the great sages, which the sages put before him with great respect, and therefore he was condemned. इति ते सत्कृतास्तेन द्विजाः पण्डितमानिना भग्नायां भव्ययाञ्छायां भग्नायां भव्ययच्नायां तस्मै विरद चक्रुधुः. My dear Vidura, all good fortune unto you. The foolish king, who thought himself very learned, thus insulted the great sages, and the sages became heartbroken by the king's word. And the sages, being broken-hearted by the king's words, became very angry at him. Hanyatamesha papah प्रकृतिदारुणः जीवन् जगादसावाशु कुरुते भस्मसाद्ध्रुवम्. All the great saintly sages immediately cried, "Kill him, kill him. He is the most dreadful sinful person. If he lives, he will certainly turn the whole world into ashes in no time." नायमर्हत्य सद्वृत्तो नरदेववरासनं योधि यज्ञपतिं विष्णुं विनन्दत्यनपत्रपः. The saintly sages continued that this impious, imprudent man does not deserve to sit on the throne at all. He is so shameless that he even dared insult the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Vishnu. Ko vainam parichakshita venamekam shubham prapta isha maishwaryam yadanugraha bhajanah. But the king Vena, who is simply inauspicious, who would blaspheme the Supreme Personality of Godhead, by whose mercy one is awarded all kinds of fortune and opulence. But for King Vena, who is simply inauspicious, who would blaspheme the Supreme Personality of Godhead, by whose mercy one is awarded all kinds of fortune and opulence. Ittam vyavasita hantum rushayo rudamanyavaha nijagnir hum krutairvenam hatamachyuta nindaya. The great sages, thus manifesting their covert anger, immediately decided to kill the king. King Vena was already as good as dead due to the blasphemy against the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thus, without using any weapons, the sages killed King Vena simply by the high-sounding words, Hum. Rishibis Shwashramapadam Gate Putra Kalevaram Sunita Palayamasa Vidya Yogena Shochati. After all the sages returned to their respective hermitages, the mother of the king Vena, Sunita, became very much aggrieved because of her son's death. She decided to preserve the dead body of her son by application of certain ingredients and by chanting mantras. Ekada munayaste tu sarasvatya सरस्वत्सलिलाप्लुताः इत्वाग्निं सत्कताश्चक्रुर् उपविष्टा सरिष्ठते सरित्थटे upavishta sarittate. Once upon a time, the same saintly persons, after taking their bath in the river Saraswati, began to perform their daily duties by offering oblations into the sacrificial fires. After this, sitting on the bank of the river, they began to talk about the transcendental person and his pastimes. वीक्ष्योत्थितांस्तदोक्तानाम् आहुर्लोकभयङ्करान् अप्यभद्रमनाताय दस्युभ्यो न भवेद्भुवः. In those days, there were various disturbances in the country that were creating a panic in the society. Therefore, all the sages began to talk amongst themselves. Since the king is dead and there is no protector in the world, misfortune may befall the people in general on account of rogues and thieves. एवं वृषान्तऋषयो धावतां सर्वतो दिशां पातुः पांसुः समुत्थितो भूरिश्चोराणामभिलुम्पताम्. When the great sages were carrying on their discussion in this way, they saw a dust storm arising from all directions. The storm was caused by the running of thieves and rogues who were engaged in plundering the citizens. तदुपद्रवमाज्ञाय लोकस्य वसूलुम्पतां भर्तर्युपरते तस्मिन् नन्योन्यं च जिगांसतां चोरप्रायं जनपदं हीनसत्त्वमराजकं लोकान्नावारयञ्चक्ता अपि तद्रोषदर्शिनः. Upon seeing the dust storm, the saintly persons could understand that there was a great deal of irregularities due to the death of the king Vena. Without government, the state was devoid of law and order, and consequently there was great uprising of murderous thieves and rogues who were plundering the riches of people in general. Although the great sages could subdue the disturbance by their powers, just as they could kill the king, they considered it improper on their part to do so. Thus, they did not attempt to stop the disturbance. Brahmana samadrukshanto dhinanam samupekshakah sravate brahmatasyapi bhinnabhandatpayo yatha. The great sages began to think that although a Brahmana is peaceful and impartial because he is equal to everyone, it is still not his duty to neglect poor humans. But by such neglect, a Brahmana's spiritual power diminishes just as water kept in the cracked pot leaks out. Nanghasya vamsho rajarsher yesha samstatumarhati amogavirya hidrupa vamshesmin keshavashrayah. The sages decided that the descendants of the family of the saintly king Anga should not be stopped, for in this family the semen was very powerful and the children were prone to become devotees of the Lord. Vinishchatyaiva mrushayo vipannasya mahipatehe mamantu rupam tarasa tatrasid bahuko naraha. After making a decision, the saintly persons and the sages churned the thighs of the dead body of King Vena with great force and according to a specific method. As a result of this churning, the dwarf like person was born from King Vena's body. काककृष्णोति ह्रस्वाङ्गो ह्रस्वबाहुर्महाहनुः ह्रस्वपान् निम्ननासाग्रो रक्ताक्षस्ताम्रमूर्धजः. This person, born from King Vena's thighs, was named Bahuka, and his complexion was as black as the crow's. All the limbs of his body were very short. His arms and legs were short, and his jaws were large. His nose was flat, his eyes were reddish, and his hair copper colored. Tam tu te vanatam dhinam kim karomiti vadinam निषीदेत्यब्रुवं स्तात स निषादस्ततो भवत्. He was very submissive and meek, and immediately after his birth he bowed down and inquired, "Sir, what shall I do?" The great sage replied, "Please sit down, Nishada." Thus Nishada, the father of Nishada race, was born. तस्य वंश्यास्तु नौषादा गिरिकाननरोचराः येनाहरज्जायमानो वेनकल्मषमुल्भणम्. After Nishada's birth, he immediately took charge of all the resultant actions of King Vena's sinful activities. As such, this Nishada class are always engaged in sinful activities like stealing, plundering, and hunting. Consequently, they are only allowed to live in hills and forests. Thus ends the chapter entitled The Story of King Vena. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare.